order the work session on scrap metal dealers. And I first, whatever, good. Let me go around and do introductions. I'll start here, please.
Lieutenant Richard Henning.
Todd Sherwood, Assistant Municipal Attorney.
Patrick Floyd.
Amy, are you on the phone? Okay. Elby Gray Jackson.
Dick Train. Ted Steele. Eric Croft.
Bill Evans.
Pete Peterson.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Township.
Oh, wait.
John, give us your name.
John Weddleton.
Thank you very much. Todd, I think you're going to do the presentation.
I will.
Thank you very much.
So, I ended up with two ordinances, and I wanted one ordinance and one AM. One way. Like the organized man.
Okay.
So, this is just to review the S version, and the Assembly Memorandum covers the changes rather well, I think. Since I wrote it, I hope it does. So I'll just go over the changes and preliminarily, I'll say this is drawn from the last work session we had with the Rules Committee and some of the feedback from the industry. It comes out of some amendments that Assemblymember Weddleton had offered, and Assemblymember Croft, in particular conversations with Lieutenant Henning, he and Assemblymember Trainee, and then Tony Goodrich at Oxford Assaying had a meeting on March 23rd to look at leads online, which has been discussed, which is the method that the police use in order to have already with the pawn ordinance, and the plan would be with this to report transactions. It might be good just to pause. Have you just briefly cover how Leads Online works?
Leads Online is already a program that we have within the Anchorage Police Department budget. It's what we currently use to track pawn shops and sales there. It can be adapted to this very easily. In fact, I don't believe there's any adaptation necessary. It's not going to cost the municipality anything to do that. We just add them to the list of people that report on Leads Online. And what it does is it enables the shopkeeper to enter in who is selling the item in question and a description of that item. It also has several different avenues or options available to the retailer if they wish to. They can keep inventory on it. They can do a bunch of different stuff on that program, which we allow them access to and for free, for no cost for them. There's a tutorial that they can run through with that Leads Online program. They can call them up and talk to a tech to get them set up and get the training going. In fact, when we did a test version of that in the assembly office down here last week with Assemblyman Trainee and Ms. Gray Jackson, they seemed to be happy with it, or at least workable. It was a workable understanding came between the two. They seemed to at least no big objections to that program. But that's what we have set in place where we can then monitor what is sold and look at the item description and compare them to our stolen list of stuff, and at least hopefully start an investigation or add valuable information to an existing investigation or one that pops up later.
So in typical fashion, within the S version, deletions from the original version are bolded, underlined, and struck out. They've got a line through them. Any additions are bolded and underlined. But I'll go through the AM just to explain. So one of the things, first thing that it did was we deleted the requirement for license plate. And one thing to keep in mind also, this covers both scrap metal dealers and precious metal dealers. Scrap metal dealers are covered in section 3, which begins at the bottom of page 2 of 9 of the ordinance. And unless I say otherwise, all these changes deal with the precious metals part of it, which is section 4, which starts at the bottom of page 4 of 9 of the ordinance. You recall from the Rules Committee meeting we had that the scrap metal folks really didn't have any problem with their portion of it. Also, as I've mentioned before, that tracks with the state statute, word for word, with the exception that we've added this reporting requirement, not just recording it. So with that in mind, with regard to the precious metal part of it, we deleted the license plate requirement that they had to walk outside and get the license plate down, and I think the police department was fine with that. The second thing was we deleted the requirement that they keep precious metals that they purchased for 30 days. That has been replaced with a requirement that they photograph it and keep the photograph for 30 days. They're not required to file the photograph in leads online, though. They're just required to keep that. So if something comes up, the police can come in and say, please show us the photograph of what you purchased. Then in both sections 3 and 4, both the scrap metal part and the precious metal part, this is at the request of the police. There was a 5-year record retention requirement. We've reduced that to 3 years because the Leads Online program only keeps information for 3 years. So to the degree a dealer wishes to use that as their record keeping as well as their reporting, it's only going to keep it for 3 years anyway, and we didn't want to sort of set them up to fail, you might say. Now, one thing I'll mention, although we changed that in the scrap metal part, under state law, they're still required to keep records for 5 years. Scrap metal dealers are. But from the municipality standpoint, 3 years is enough. Then the fourth thing, and this really goes to the heart of the issue that was discussed so much, is instead of defining precious, well, we define precious metal, but instead of saying this is all precious metals, now it is crafted precious metals. So previously, wherever the phrase precious metal appeared, I inserted the word crafted in front of it. And then if you go to page 6 of 9 in the ordinance, and H4, there's a definition for crafted precious metal. And I'll read that out loud. Crafted precious metal means jewelry, silverware, an art object, or another object made wholly or partly from precious metal. And I also added crafted precious metal does not include coins, numismatic coins, commemorative medallions, bars, placer metals, doré, bullion, or unrefined precious metals. Tony Goodrich has seen this. She's seen the whole ordinance, but in particular, she at least, speaking for the industry, was very happy with this definition because it ends up excluding quite a bit, but it includes the things that are, in theory, very identifiable. And then we'll just keep going because the other thing was changing the definition of precious metal dealer. So the term is now crafted precious metal dealer. Means any natural person, business, partnership, or corporation, either as principal or agent, engaging in the business of buying crafted precious metal from the public. I'm just going to pause there because the word public was inserted there at the request. Many of you might have seen the Elemental provided a handout, and I think the clerk's office sent it out to all the assembly members. And they were here but didn't speak at the Rules Committee. They deal strictly wholesale to wholesale. They never buy from the public and, from people walking in off the street. So their concern was they didn't think there was any reason this ordinance should apply to them, and that seemed to be the general feeling. Their recommended amendment was to simply put in general public. I chose to drop the word general because to me, I don't know what the difference is between the public and general public. So anyway, that word is in there. That should satisfy their concern. So from the public for the purpose of resale or processing. Then I also added, and this was a concern that Phil Widener raised, I think Assemblymember Gray Jackson raised, but ordinary people buy precious metal all the time for an investment type thing. crafted precious metal does not include a natural person who buys precious metals on an occasional basis to hold for personal investment purposes. I actually think it's a little overkill to have that in there, because I think the definition of crafted precious metal dealer sort of by definition leaves people out that are doing it for personal investment purposes. But just out of an abundance of caution, I applied that part as well. So it's clear that this doesn't apply to them either. And then the last definition is transaction. So that was changed to just say this is crafted precious metal by a crafted precious metal dealer from the public for purpose of resale or processing. And I think that covers everything in AM, and that covers all the changes that were made. Now, one thing I'm going to bring up, which I wasn't going to, but I thought Tony Goodrich was going to be here, so I'm not speaking for her. I just thought the Assembly should be aware of this issue. She did get to look at this. She was at the meeting with both Assemblymember Craig Jackson and Training Lieutenant Henning. And she had looked at this and said, everything looks okay to her. She looked at the S version, but then she called yesterday, and her concern, and she may talk to one of you about it, the requirement about photographing, which says it's for $100 or greater, and that's at the top of page 6 of 9 in D. And you see E is where we deleted the 30-day hold, and then D, this is the weekly report to the Chief of Police using Leads Online. But that's where we added the part about photographing. She said she had thought that what was discussed or what was intended was that they wouldn't have to report anything on under $100. I said, I never heard that, but the way this reads now, you take a photograph if it's more than $100, but all crafted precious metal jewelry sales, and there she is, get reported if they are, no matter the amount.
Todd, thank you very much. We have several questions, so why don't we have the questions and then you can continue if you don't mind. Thank you. Mr. Littleton?
I have a couple. So one, maybe I'll go backwards, but in your definitions, say on 5, where you say from the public means not all of us to me, but in kind of agreements I have as a retailer with different vendors and so on, we say to final users or end users, and that means kind of what it means. So if I have a dealing, like a lot of stuff I have, I can't sell to other stores. It has to be an end user. And that's kind of a common phrase, I think, in the retail environment. It might be more precious metal from end users or something. I don't know if that person's money to deal with that, but it's real common.
We're such a different industry in that we do wholesale, retail, and a service side where we serve the mining community. So I'm familiar with that end user phrase from my days in Nordstrom when I was just on the retail side. But being wholesale, retail, and sort of service, it makes it sort of a different.
Well, I think most retailers do all of those. Part of mine doesn't, so I do as well. And but some things I can't sell because I have an agreement only to end users. So, and I don't know if that's critical, but that's the phrase I'd look for here, as opposed to public. I mean, what's public?
If I may, just to speak to that, as I said, I read through all of everything Elemental wrote, and they looked at a number of different ways this was dealt with in other jurisdictions, and they suggested general public, and that's why I went with the word public. In my mind, you don't need to do another definition of public because it's so commonly known and used, whereas end user, probably we'd end up having to then define what we mean by end user. And I'm never sure where the dividing line is as a lawyer to under-defining and over-defining, but that's always a concern.
You'd be surprised at the length of the contracts I have with a company that sells a game. I can provide you the definition, but I don't know if it's good. But can I just please? So when you go on the leads online, can someone who's set up with their, can they download a list of things that have recently been added?
We don't have that capability at this point, sir.
Because that would be really useful, you know, from my side, is just kind of see, okay, is anybody sold something that I buy?
I would love to be able to do that, but just to keep up with the data of what is stolen and then what's recovered and to make sure that's up to date so we don't identify something is stolen when it's actually been recovered and remove it from the list would be, I mean, that would be very helpful. I agree. We don't have the staffing or the manpower or the programs to do that at this point.
Is it possible the programs could be set up to do that? So
I do not.
Tony could download it?
Oh, that program itself? I don't believe, no, sir, I don't believe so.
Anything else, Mr. West?
Well, one last one is I mean, have you considered, I think it'd be easy indeed to put reports to police. The dealer shall make a weekly report to the chief of police summarizing all transactions for more than $100. Does that get it?
Well,
It's a small transaction.
Items for $100, I think.
The issue that I was talking about, as Tony came in, that she had raised, yeah, there's a number of ways that we could amend this. And I guess I should say procedurally, where we're at now, because the S version has been published, it's in the agenda, would be a floor amendment as far as I know. But Lieutenant Henning may want to speak to that issue in terms of is it a good idea or not from a police standpoint, and you may want to have Tony speak to it more. That would be one place it could be changed if that was what somebody wanted. The other would be under transaction, that definition could just be changed to the purchase of crafted precious metal valued at $100 or more. So there's either place, and it probably makes more sense where you raised it because that's the other place where, the only place where it says $100 right now. But
I think the police department concern sir would be that, I mentioned the last committee meeting with the crooks, they're kind of very quick to adapt to what we have out there. And we already see them parsing out to different locations, different pawn shops, et cetera. So they're not selling all their items in one spot. I think as far as a data gathering tool, we would prefer that all precious metal is a good compromise. Crafted precious metals is a good compromise, and we can live with that. And that narrows it down. But it would limit it down to what we can see and what kind of evidence or what kind of potential breadcrumbs we can follow if we did that, because I can see people parsing it out and cutting their limits down and splitting stuff up and just going bare minimum so they don't have it reported.
Okay, so can I talk to Estelle?
Please.
So your issue.
Sorry if I was late, I have my time.
Okay, so your issue is just, if it's below 100, you'd have to do board and stuff on these online, and that would be 10 items a week or 50?
Oh, way more than that, hundreds.
So you do a huge amount.
So it'd be very labor intensive. So for instance, we deal with someone and they are a silver, for instance, and they craft silver, and they'll come in and buy maybe like a whole quarter to make a ring out of it and then sell it at the market, the Saturday market. Well, then they'll come back in and maybe bring us back the ones that got overheated by the torch or whatever, and we'll pay, $5 for those, and then turning around selling them $500 worth of silver so they can go craft more. And then that's under $100 that we're actually purchasing, and the item's worth maybe $2. It feels very cumbersome to me, labor intensive, to have to go into leave online and do anything under $100. And I thought that we were clear on that, and actually your is it Lunt? I don't know how to correctly. Your pawn shop. Sorry.
Now you got me in a metal block.
Oh.
Detective Luke.
Detective Luke, thank you. Actually came in today, and he was under the same understanding that I was originally, that anything $100, an item of $100 more, so that would cover some of the wedding rings that was sold there. Some value item that would be a crime. Would be photographed. We'll hold that photograph. We'll go leave it online. We'll log it all in. We'll actually provide a photograph, which isn't done even by the pawn shops at this point. So we're doing a little step up but we wouldn't hold it because of the value problem fluctuation. We've covered all that. But the way it read, I'm not an attorney, but I have, unfortunately, the victim said, making assumptions about contract reports. It came back on hunting. And so I just didn't want to make an assumption that items under 100 were excluded from the driver's license.
We talked about that.
So as long as I get that amendment, I think it could be, if Gene came up with an idea, that on item 4, line 6, page 5 of 9, if it was just added, or was that the one?
My
Or
thought-
no,
My thought was
That's
under the
the
exemptions, in the
69.
exemption section,
Oh, yeah.
it says, you know, where the exemptions are, if it was, you know, transactions under $100 are exempt. And then at that point, we wouldn't be required to do all of this other stuff on transactions or items.
We're still gonna always have a name view. We're still gonna always have a check. We do not deal in cash. So, we're still going to be able to tell you when we did the transaction, who did the transaction, up to at least 30, depending on how active our cameras are.
I'm not
giving these
I think we covered a lot of that already.
Oh, okay.
As long as you were here, so
I'm
the
sorry.
point was, it would be a lot of transactions for you.
Yeah, yeah, like a $2 piece of silver or $5.
So lots of things.
Like someone brings in a back of a silver earring because they lost it.
LOTS. Okay, so following up on that. So that's a hassle for them, but you know, in truth, taking a picture is easy, because what I do is we have cameras and I just go like this. So now it's recorded on my camera for 30 days. So if I ever have to backtrack, if I think, oh, that might be stolen, we just go to the camera and I have a picture of who and everything right there. So I say, one, does that count for the picture? And in that case, could maybe have this $100 limit for putting it in the online, but everything gets photographed, because all they gotta do is hold it up to the camera, which is probably already on the camera when they're buying stuff.
And once again, sir, it goes back to the data from the entry of the person who's selling the picture to go along with the data of the person, whether it's entered into their logbook or whether it's entered into leads online. It's the data that gets into leads online, once again, so that we can all be on the same sheet of music and have one place for that data collection to help us track those breadcrumbs back is what we're looking at.
Okay, so one more thought on that. So briefly, when you say someone who sells stuff at the show and maybe they get a ring and then they bring back pieces of it, that would not be the general public, that would be dealers. So transactions like that wouldn't be covered anyway, because it's a business to business. So if you were only doing general public, would that be a whole lot under 100?
Oftentimes those people are not actually business people. They're maybe hermits that live out in Peterville and they.
General public
do
inventory is
rings. Yeah.
probably 85% of those transactions.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mike, thanks to everybody. We've come a long way, I think, this first introduced, so
Long.
good work. Sort of a follow-up on one of Mr. Wilson's questions, is the leads online information publicly available?
I'm sorry, I didn't cover that, sir. But no, it is not publicly available. It's only available to the police department. And they can look up their records and only their records and none of the other subscribers.
Okay, so they can't, so one subscriber can't look up another subscriber's data. I can't look up their data. Only
That is correct,
Okay,
yes, sir.
okay, that's helpful, thank you. And I want to make an assumption, I don't want to assume anything I shouldn't assume. I presume an electronic photo meets the definition.
Yes, sir. Leads Online has it, places where you can enter an e-file of those
So it
photographs.
doesn't have to be a printed photo.
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay, and the final thing, and I know, Madam Chair, you'd like to have this done before you and I and Bill and others do the assembly, but it seems to me we are probably lacking a C, a summary of economic effects for the private sector, which we haven't quite figured out yet.
A C did accompany the
Original, and it was, I think, contested. So I don't know how we resolve that prior to me taking action on this, but it seems to me we need to have that.
Well, Mr. Flynn, what I'm going to do is ask Rose to do a C and have it laid on the table at the meeting on Tuesday.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I don't think we have a firm grasp on that yet. Now I'd like to have it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Evans?
I think the question is more than the two questions, but with respect to the photograph, And you're talking about like, are they, I got the impression that you don't have to attach the photograph with the report. You have to maintain the photograph supposedly for 30 days. Is that correct?
That's correct. The ability to attach it on the report is there, so they don't have to store it at their business if they do not want to, or they can keep it on there wherever the ordinance says.
And it was just, originally we had the idea that they had to hold the property, and that was obviously problematic. So we substituted this, just take a picture of it and hold that for 30 days. And my question is just, since it's not as burdensome now, that you're just taking a picture of it, is 30 days long enough to hold it? Or is that? Because 30 days when you were restricting their ability to sell it, seemed like you wanted to balance the two. Now that it's just a photograph, is there any value in?
If they take advantage of the leads online, it would be kept with that file for the 3 years before it disappears. If they keep it on their person, I think 30 days, in the business, 30 days would be enough time for us to look at the reports and make the phone calls and say, hey, do you have the photographs of this transaction? If something pops up, it'd give us time to cycle what's coming, absorb what's coming in and make those questions. Obviously, the preferable way, I think, would be if folks use the leads online and did an e-file submittal of it, but that depends on the burden of the business.
Thank you, cleaning service, Mr. Train.
Just want to thank the Cromwell Wall and the police department for working on this, and the district for stepping up. Thanks you guys for being there. I think you understand now how leads work. And my thanks to the police department for bringing your leads lady over. I didn't know we only had one person that enters all these things. One lady that does this. Hope she never gets sick or moves on.
I'm denying her leave every day, sir.
I think this would be a good ordinance. It's good we've got to this point now. Thank you guys very much for doing this. All of you.
Thank you, Mr. Train.
Thank you.
Ditto, Mr. Steele.
Yeah, on, what is it, section 8, craft prestige metals, you deleted from that, coins and things that I guess are not readily identifiable in terms of age, but you took commemorative medallions. What about an Olympic medal or something like that, which is a commemorative medallion that also should be identifiable for enforcement purposes?
Well, as I recall the discussion, I think there was maybe a difference of opinion between police and industry as to a number of these things, as to whether they're identifiable or not. And that's one reason we got rid of even using the word identifiable. So the only thing I can say about your example, if there is a true Olympic medallion missing out there, that's probably going to be a lot bigger case than what is covered. And it will probably get a lot of attention, so.
You don't want to know the down or
But that was one, I actually added the commemorative medallions in there just because I've been over to Alaska Mint and they do their own thing with gold and silver and so on. And it seemed to me that it kind of fit within what the industry wanted excluded, because the idea was trying to cover everything that kind of falls into the bulk metals category. And numismatic coins like a 1920 Walking Liberty silver dollar, one usually looks pretty much like another.
And you wouldn't want those melted down, and the other ones you lose your values.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Steele.
All right, thank you.
Mr.
Yeah, a couple questions as quickly as I can. So, would your preference be that they put the photographs online? I mean,
Sir, yeah, that would be the police department's preference. It'd be easier. But like I said, I don't know what burden that would put on the individual.
That's really our intention. Because it's so easy to track. We don't have a program or the ability to link our transaction number to the report to the picture.
Keeping a lot of photos.
Our intention is to put anything we have to photograph and get the information for it, upload it on the computer online.
And actually photograph the item itself, not just do an overhead shot from a PDR system that we have, but an actual
And if they
photograph.
sell us, 10 items, we'll lay them out on a train, take a photograph of the 10 items and upload that.
Because it seems like following up on Mr. Evans' point, the 30 days is a little short if you're not facilitating. You guys doing that, put it on, so I'd say something like shall be retained for 90 days or stored on leads. Once you put it on leads, you know you don't have to store it long. You can delete it.
We take pictures and throw them in a file. They're just in a file with no organization. Leads gives us the ability to link everything together.
Right, and if, for those who didn't want to, for whatever weird reason, then you probably need a little more than 30 days to keep it, because otherwise
That might be affected with unethical people in our industry, because not everyone maintains the same standards. Some-
Many times when the police have come in, it's after 30 days.
You think, just to go
Probably
around to
80% of the time that we've dealt with the police is after 30 days.
So what about that 90 days or store it? And if you store it, then that's all you have to do, you put it on leaves.
Yes, sir, I like that.
And then revisiting the $100 thing a second, so, do you require pawn shop, does pawn shops have $100 limit?
They, as far as I recall, I haven't looked at the bond ordinance for a while, they have to report every transaction.
So-
It doesn't matter on value, and
Okay. And then, but, am I wrong in the assumption that it's more likely a pawn shop would see a significant under $100, that they would parse out to the many pawn shops in town $1,000 worth of merchandise into under $100 things than it is that we're really going to see that done in Tony's business?
I think that'd be circumstantial, sir, depending on the case. We have had a case where they parsed it out to pawn shops and then one of the bullion places. They do it. They learn from the statutes just like, as soon as they pop up, just like we do.
Yeah.
And we would have a name that would be able to tie with, you know, because we write a check to everybody. So anytime we write a check, we're going to have what the item was, when, the date that it happened, all of that stuff, a name. And then when they take the check to the bank will get their identification number or account.
How many of you are there? I mean, I kind of have a sense of how many.
In our
pawn shops.
office?
No, of different entities. There's Oxford and you guys.
There's only
Yeah.
one like ours that's full service, where we serve the mining community, the investment community, and do scrap.
How many other dealers that might be under
Just
this
me.
definition?
There's just
There's
us,
probably
just,
there's probably 8 or 10
yeah, there's,
little guys.
That
You
would
know,
fit the
there's,
case.
yeah, there's places like in the malls that buy gold stuff. There's a place over off of King Street where Asian
There's a
gold.
place in the Sears Mall watch repair that has a sign by gold.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Cross. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was just looking on the fines page, on page 8, and you've got a couple of these I think have to be adjusted. 10.20.041E still says it's a $500 fine if you don't retain the records for 5 years. So do we need to change that to 3 years?
Thank you.
And then the very last one, 10.20.042E, the same thing.
Sounds like a good forum in there.
I think that's it, thank you.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Sherwood, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Nothing else.
Okay, any other comments? Well, since we have a little bit of time, do you have a comment you'd like to make?
just thank you. I was slow around the curve on this, because I've never worked at the local, everyone's been very accommodating.